Hey, this is John with Smoke Eater Guitars. Our mission is to keep your axe playing its best at all times. On this channel, we'll cover some basic setups all the way up to pro level repairs. I'll show you tips, tricks, even some trade secrets. Our mission is to save rock and roll, one guitar at a time. What we're going to be talking about is all things guitars. I started off with being able to change my own strings, to adjusting the height, the action, adjusting the truss rod, taking the nut down to where it's supposed to be. Real simple, just maintenance type issues. And then as my collection grew and my so did my skills. I got into building a couple guitars, so really want to learn how inner workings of guitars work. Really want to know how all these little things fit together. Build a few guitars and you'll learn. All right, so my name is John. I work on everything from $10,000 guitars to $100 guitars, and really when it comes down to it, we shouldn't be afraid to mess with our own stuff. There's not anything on a guitar that you can just screw it up beyond repair. About the only thing you could do is break a truss rod, and that would kind of set you back a little bit. Other than that, everything that you can do to a guitar can be repaired. So don't be afraid to dig into them. Let me start with something basic. And let's just explain some of the key components of guitars and why this person's guitar is different than that person's guitar, and what the benefits of each one of those different parts are. So we're going to go over a few things tonight. We're going to go over some bridge assemblies. So we'll be talking about some floating bridges and some hardtail bridges and the different styles and what the pros and cons on each of those. After we talk about those bridges, we're going to move all the way up the guitar to the tuners. A lot of people don't give the tuners enough credit. You get a bad set of tuners, it makes life a little difficult because your guitar your tuning's not stabilized. So you really need to know the different style tuners, because once you know those different style tuners, you'll know how to properly restring a guitar. Right below those tuners, we'll talk about the nuts and different styles, what they're made of, how to adjust them. And then the last thing we're going to talk about tonight is action. I've been dealing a lot with action lately, and how it goes. So let's take a look at our first tremolo. I'm going to grab a guitar over here. We're going to talk about a Stratocaster tremolo. So we're looking at a tremolo or a bridge assembly on a Stratocaster. The unique thing about this is that it can be a floating or you can hardtail it. Floating means that you can set it, and I left this arm on so you'll be able to see this. You can set it to where that trim sits off the body a little bit, and this whammy bar, you can go up or down with it. We'll see a little bit more about floating whenever we take a look at a Floyd Rose that I have. But this is a really, really common vibrato type of tremolo system. This is called a 6-screw because there's 6 screws underneath or right in front of these that are kind of holding this in place. And the way this works is your string are at a certain tension right now, so it should be in tune, right? So that's an E. When I dive this bar down, it loosens up that tension and lowers that note, and whenever I release it, it should, if it's set up right, it'll go back to its original and back to an E. So you see that this is an E, So I'm going to plug in an amp real quick so you guys can hear this. So that's an E. So whenever I dive this, if I pick up on it, it puts more tension on the string and makes the pitch go higher. And if it's set up correctly, it'll always go back to tune. Now there's a lot of things that affect that tune. The nut up on the neck, the age of the strings, the tension of the springs, all that can determine whether it'll go back into good tune or not. So that's kind of, these are what you call saddles. This is what the string goes over. This is what the string goes over. And this is where the point of contact from that really gives you that tone. So if I tighten those screws, it pulls that saddle back. And if I loosen that screw, it pushes that saddle forward. There's a spring behind that screw. And that's how you set your intonation. Intonation means, so the neck length from the bridge that we were just talking about to here is 25.5 inches on this guitar. Intonation means if this is an E, this is an E, halfway down this neck, I'm going to find another E. That's why you have two dots on your guitar. So that's an E. If I hit this, it's an E also. It's just an octave higher. So, and that's how you set intonation. You go here, you make sure that's an E or that's in tune. If that's not in tune, if it's flat or sharp, you move that saddle just a little bit. So you would move this up and down to get that intonation. All right. That is this trim. There is another part to this trim, tremolo system, that I'm going to show you how the string creates all this tension, but how we counteract that tension with some strings on the back. All right, so this is the backside of a Stratocaster bridge system. You have a claw here that holds onto these springs that is connected to a plate that's on the bottom side of where those saddles are. So it's just mounted to the bottom side of this. So if I want to hardtail, which means take that tremolo system all the way down to the body and make it super hard to do any kind of vibrato with it, any kind of wah-wah type bar with it, I can take these two screws and tighten those springs, right? And it will keep that trim kind of decked, is what you call that. You keep that trim decked to the body. So it'll be flat up against that body. If you want more play or you want it floating, you can loosen these or even take off one of the springs. And then that what happens is that trim comes off the body a little bit. And then you set your string height and you set everything. And then that allows you to go up and down with your bar and either make that tone higher or take that tone lower. And that's the backside. Really, you may see a wire here, but there's no electronics in here. This is just a ground wire. It grounds the tremolo system. And the best place to ground that trim is right here on the claw assembly. So let me bring you in just a little bit closer. You can see. And that's it. Now let me show you the difference between what, if you buy a Stratocaster, when it's maybe made in China, when it's made. Some of them that are made in Mexico, or it's a Squire that's a little lower end. Let me show you the difference, because the top end, the saddles and everything will look the same, but really the difference is this is what you get compared to this block. This is solid metal, a little bit more stable. This, not, it's metal, but it's very thin, very lightweight. So it doesn't give you a whole lot of resonance. The bigger this metal bar is, and I've got a brass one, man, that makes that resonant just sing out. It's a beautiful sounding trim system. These, they're not bad. I actually have a couple of guitars that have these in them, and they play just fine for my style. But if I was to go record, I would want to get the true Fender big block on there, and not this thin block. And that, my friends, is a Stratocaster bridge system. So we're going to move on, and the next one will go really quick because we're going to take a look at PRS, which is a Paul Reed Smith guitar. Very similar to that. That's why I wanted to show it to you next, because if you know how to adjust and work on this, the Paul Reed Smith styles are just like it, except they look a little different. So let me grab that one. So this is a Paul Reed Smith guitar. Let me move up a little bit. Paul Reed Smith guitars are some of the best made, whether they're made in the U.S. or Indonesia. Let's take a look at this trim real quick. All right, I'm going to bring you down. Very similar to a Strat bridge. It does the same thing. These, the real difference on these is the screws that they use are a little different. They're pocketed or slotted to where your trim, when it goes down, has a little lip on it, and it catches into those screws. So it's really hard to deck this. This is a true floating tremolo. All right, so you can see that this trim is not all the way down onto the body. See how I can slide this underneath it? That trim is not all the way down to the body. This is a true floating, and it's designed to be a true floating. So what that allows me to do is I can pick up. Let me get you back on a good picture here. Oh man, I showed my face. What it allows me to do is pull up on this bar and really give it a high pitch, or go low. But because of the way these screws are slotted like we were talking about, it makes everything go back into place a little bit better. So no matter whether you raise it or lower it, you can go full dive on this thing, come back, and it's almost always going to go back into pitch. Always going to go back into tune. But set intonation, same style screws. These are solid saddles versus bent metal saddles. Some people think these sound better. Some people think the vintage style that's on the Stratocaster sound better. I say there's not enough difference between the two to make a difference in sound. But stability-wise, I think these are a little bit more quality made. But that being said, I'm a huge Stratocaster fan, and a huge Paul Reed Smith fan. But trim, the saddles, the springs, the screws, all of this is very similar to what you get. The real difference is how you set it up. You're not going to hardtail this guitar. You're not going to deep dive or set it against the body. It has the same system in the back with the big block and the springs. You can kind of see that behind the plate there. This guitar's name is Rosita, by the way. All my guitars, just FYI, all my guitars are named after women from The Walking Dead. So I have Rosita, I have Maggie, I have Carol, all the different females. So if you see a name on a guitar and it's a female's name, it's not my wife's name. Although I do have one guitar named after my wife. This one's not it. This is Rosita. All right, so we won't spend a whole lot of time on this one because, again, very, very similar to a Stratocaster. The one I'm going to bring in next is still a floating bridge. It's a floating tremolo system, completely different than the last two we just looked at. It's called a Floyd Rose, and you guys that play guitar, if you play a Floyd Rose guitar, man, I hope you have a good tech because they're kind of hard to work on. So let me put this one away. All right, ladies and gentlemen. This is kind of a cool guitar. It's an EVH. If you don't know, EVH is Eddie Van Halen's brand. The difference from the ones we were looking at with the Stratocaster and the Paul Reed Smith and this one is night and day. This one attaches with just these two pivot nuts right here. And what that does is they're slotted kind of like the EVH, where this kind of goes into a groove. They're kind of triangled out, if you would. And then that it slides on and kind of catches. So it's a 2-point trim system. Now the EVH, when you're tuning or when you're restringing these, you have to loosen this screw up. I know it's hard because it's got so much graphic behind it. Let me do this. See if this helps out any. There we go. You have to loosen this Allen wrench up, and it loosens up a little bar here, which loosens up the string, and you can pop the string out. What that means is whenever you're restringing, you got to cut the ball off the end of the string, stick it down in there, and then tighten it up really, really tight to keep that string in there. These aren't so much of an issue. All the way up to the B string, the B, the G, the D, the A, the E, those are all easy. So whenever this little guy here, this little high E string, always tends to mess with me. Dive in and see if I can't get under it a little bit better. There we go. Yeah, that one always tends to mess with me whenever I'm trying to do it. Now, the great thing about these trim systems is that you have fine tuners right here. These fine tuners here, once you have the tuning set, you're going to lock down the nut. And we're going to get to what a locking nut is in just a second. You're going to lock down the nut, and this is all you're going to tune. The reason why this is so hard to do a setup on is because this, again, is a true floating tremolo system. And the springs will counteract it, but when you're tuning it, you have to tune, raise this up a little bit more. When you're tuning a Floyd Rose, you tune this to E, and you get all the rest of them kind of close. Tune this to E, then tune that to A, then come back and retune this to E, then retune that to A. Then you tune the D, then back to E, back to A, back to D, back to E, back to A, back to D. And you're always keeping tension here too. So you're playing this thing back and forth until you get it right. Now what I do is a little bit different than other techs, but what I do is I will block in the spring assembly. This has a spring assembly. This is just like what we saw on the Stratocaster and the PRS. Even the ground wire is the same. So what I will do on mine is I will put a block of wood here, and then I will put a block of wood on the front side. I take the springs off, put a block of wood on the front side, so that trim can't move. Then I tune it. Then I put the strings back on it, and I will pull enough tension so it just barely releases this block. And once it releases the blocks, I know I'm set, right? So it means the strings are at the right place, or the springs are at the right place, the tremolo's level up front, and it needs to be parallel to the guitar. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a whole video on the Floyd Rose trim and how to properly set it up and change the strings, because it is truly a little difficult. And if you have one, guys and gals, just know that if and when you're going to take that to get it worked on, if you take it to a guitar shop like Guitar Center, or a local guitar shop, or a local person to change the strings or do some work on it, it's probably going to be a little bit more expensive than you would. That is an EVH Floyd Rose. You will find these typically on Ibanez and some other thrasher type guitars, shredding type guitars. This is a hardtail tremolo system. This is a Telecaster. If you don't know, let me take it out a little bit so you can see it. Man, I really like this guitar. I changed the neck on this to a 50s style neck. They call it a baseball bat type neck. You ought to see how thick that neck is. And I always thought, man, the thicker the neck, the harder it is going to be to play it. It's the exact opposite. This thing plays wonderful, wonderful. I can't brag about it enough. I don't play it enough. I have quite a few guitars. Some of them I will pick up and play for a month or two and then put aside, and I won't play them again for a couple months. And I just forget how much I really like this guitar until I pick it up again. The reason we call this a hardtail is because it does not have a trim system that floats, or you can't do any dives or anything. It is solid mounted to the body. It does have saddles, just like your other trim systems. You adjust the intonation exactly like here. You adjust the action exactly like the Stratocaster. It just is solid to the body. On the Telecaster, you have a pickup built into your bridge system, your bridge plate. Very good guitars. I like these, but this is a 6 saddle Telecaster. I want to show y'all the kind of the traditional. There is and I don't have one here at the shop right now, but this is kind of what you would think of when you're thinking of a traditional Telecaster. These are called a 3-barrel saddles and bridge system. These are just round pieces of brass that you can adjust up and down with these little set screws, and you can set intonation, but you can only set intonation. You're setting intonation to 2 screws at a time because that barrel moves. Because there's a string that goes here, 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 here. So there's one string on each side of this big screw. So this is called a 3-barrel Telecaster bridge. Now, they do make a 3-barrel Telecaster bridge, but these are called compensated. And the reason they're called compensated is they are grooved out where the string will go over it at a certain spot on that barrel, not just in the center. And they compensate those to where it is a typical where you would need it intonated on a guitar. I can look at a guitar very quickly and tell you if it's intonated or not. And I'm going to show you a little trick here. See how this is stair steps up, right? On a 6 6 saddle bridge, they will stair step up, drop back down, stair step up. Almost every guitar you ever see, it starts from the lowest, middle, high, lowest, middle, high. If you are using D'Angelico strings, these two are almost always perfectly even. The E and the B are almost perfectly even, and it's because of the gauge of the string. Hardtail, Telecaster. We have the 6, we have the 3 barrel, we have the 6 saddle and the 3 barrel. You have a 3 barrel that's either compensated or not compensated. So let's move on to the next bridge. The next bridge we're going to talk about are very typical on a Gibson or Epiphone, and it's called a Tune-o-matic bridge. If you just say each manufacturers have their own names, right? But if you say, hey, I'm looking for a guitar with a Tune-o-matic bridge, this is the type of setup. It has a tailpiece where your strings run through, and whenever you're stringing it, you go in over the saddle. These are saddles, and then up to the tuners. So let's take a little bit closer look here. Get this set up. So the tailpiece is just a solid piece of metal, has holes drilled in it to allow your string to go through. These saddles is kind of the what keeps your strings in line on your neck, right? And then there's a groove cut into the saddle that keeps it kind of stable. So that's really all there is to a Tune-o-matic style bridge. There's no real tremolo. There's no effects or diving or anything like that with this. Although some guitarists have learned little tricks like pushing on the back side of the saddle will give it almost like a tremolo effect, but very seldom will that do. When we get into stringing a guitar, how to restring your guitar, we're going to go over how to restring a Tune-o-matic and a Stratocaster style. The Floyd Rose, again, is going to be a video all on its own. But this is a very good bridge. I really enjoy playing guitars that have a Tune-o-matic. You would think, okay, it's less complicated. There's not much to them. There's less options you could do with the bridge. Why would you prefer this over like a tremolo system? I'm going to tell you, if you have the right setup on your guitar, this bridge can bring your action so low. If you have the right strings on this type of bridge, it makes that guitar play like butter. And you just can't, I can't reproduce that on a Stratocaster versus a guitar that has this style bridge in it. Now, the downfall to this is the individual saddles can be adjusted for string height, right? And each string can be adjusted. This saddle assembly is radiused to the neck that guitar is built on, and it's radiused like this. This neck is a compound radius neck. I'm going to fix this for a second. This neck is a compound radius neck, so it means that higher up on the neck is going to be a smaller radius, and this one starts at a 9.5. The lower you get, it will go down to a 14. So when they made this saddle assembly, they had to come up with a saddle radius that matched as you went up. And they did it because this guitar plays great. But normally this is the radius of the neck. So if I had if I wanted to buy a new Tune-o-matic, I didn't like this one. I wanted to replace it with a higher end, Gibson Tune-o-matic. And I would have to make sure that this saddle assembly matched the radius of the neck that I was buying, because you could buy a 10 radius saddle assembly and have a 9.5 radius neck, or you can have a 12 radius neck and a 10 saddle, and then that causes all kind of string buzz and all that kind of stuff. So great assembly. Works awesome when everything is set up properly. Tunomatic. You may want to consider this. I know you kids that are just getting a guitar thinking, it's you got to have a Floyd Rose, you got to have all this modern stuff. You got to have. I'm telling you, if you ever play a guitar that has a Tunomatic and it's set up right, it is a great, great guitar. Not only to learn on because it's easy to play, but it's a great sounding system. Very, very steady, very, very sturdy tuning. Great, great bridge to work with. This is a kind of a unique to this style body. It's called an offset um, system where it uses what looks to be very close to the Tunomatic bridge plate here, the saddle plate, but it also has a trim system. Now this one is completely different, and to take this one apart to show you the inner workings is a little bit more difficult. I can't just take a plate off to show you. I have to take this whole thing off. So uh, if I get any requests that want to go a deep dive into a Jazzmaster or a Mustang or another offset type guitar that has this bridge system, I am more than happy to do so. But for the sake of time today, we won't do it. This system is pretty tough to set up. There's a lot of moving parts here, including this that moves back and forth when you dive it. This will move back and forth. And if you don't have it set right, the strings will hit the side bars here and will buzz when you're playing. It's very frustrating to get set right. If you do have a Mustang, a Jazzmaster, what's the other one? It's slipping my mind right now. But if you have a Fender or a guitar that looks similar to this and you have this type trim on it, I would recommend bringing it to a tech and having the tech go through how to properly set this up, because it's not easy. A lot of moving parts. This was my first Jazzmaster type guitar, and I built this one from the ground up. And I learned a lot when it comes to this trim system. This is very simple. This is where you fall into a lot of problems. The barrel style, single screw barrel, and there's 6 barrels. Some of them can be adjusted up and down. Some of them are set. But I will tell you, once you get it set up properly, this guitar is very, very unique sounding guitar. Stratocasters, yeah, it depends on pickups. It depends on a lot of other things. But to listen to one of these and to play one of these is unlike playing a Strat. It's unlike playing a Tele or a Les Paul or anything else. It is truly in a class of its own. The sounds of these single coil soap bar pickups is just amazing when you have it all wired in right. This one was a pain in my ass. That's the tremolo system on this guitar. I got one more to show you. What is this? Well, I'm going to tell you what this is. This is a Bigsby style system. This is actually a Bigsby. I think they owned the patent for a long time because you don't see a lot of different manufacturers of this style trim system. This will actually, it has a bar and it'll give you some up and down. It's spring loaded, big spring right here. The strings attach right underneath this bar, then go under, then over another saddle assembly. Now, most of the Bigsbys that you see will have a saddle assembly just like those Tunomatics. This one's a little higher end guitar. So what you actually have are these rollers that the strings are on. These rollers actually roll, right? So it causes absolutely zero friction at this point, but it gives a nice sturdy spot to go down to. Very good system. Classic sound out of the Bigsbys. Rockabilly, a lot of rockabilly bands play Bigsby style guitars. a lot of old rock and roll, play Bigsby style guitars. I personally have never owned a Bigsby. This guitar actually is owned by a music teacher. Again, changing the strings on here is different than changing the strings on any other guitar. Uh, Very cool sounding. If you're lucky enough, guys, to have a Bigsby guitar, cherish it because it's truly an awesome piece of machinery. All right, that's the last bridge we're going to go over. But while I have this out, we're going to turn our attention to some tuners. So these are called vintage locking tuners. And the reason they're called that is basically because these are some of the first kind of tuners that came out on guitars, right? They are a split shaft tuner, which means that this shaft right here is split. And when you string it, you stick your string down into it, make the little bend, and then tune your guitar up. And it works really good. If I had to only pick one type of tuning machine to be able to use, it would be the split shaft vintage tuners. Super easy to change the strings on, very quick. You can spend a lot more money on solid shaft locking tuners, but you really don't need them if you have this style. It's a great style tuner. Most of my guitars that I have right now are these vintage split shaft tuners. All right, this is my American Strat. So we're going to talk about these are solid tuners. These are locking tuners, right? So these are solid posts. They don't have it split in the middle. Let me bring this down so you can see. I know my camera action sucks, guys. I'm sorry. These are solid. Now these have a locking device. So when I send the string through the hole, this little knob here, I turn until it tightens up against the string. It sends a rod up against the string. If this is my string, it sends a rod up into against it and tightens up against it, and it holds it in place. Locking tuners. If you just need to change your springs quickly, this is a tuner to have. These are the type of tuners you want. They're stable. They work well. Very little problems have you ever had, especially when you buy name brand. So these are non-locking solid shaft tuners. That means there is no locking device on the backside, right? There's no knobs back here to turn. It's just flat. These are good. It takes a little bit more time to string them. What you do is you put them through the hole, and then you have to kind of lock that string in place, hold it in place, and start making turns. This is what you think about whenever you think about restringing a guitar, is turning these things. How many turns do I actually need? Blah, 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 blah. Guys, there's nothing wrong with these tuners. These tuners have been around forever, and they work great. They're just a little bit more time consuming, and if you get online, there's probably 10 different ways you can tell you how to tune these. When we get into tuning guitars, I will go over this with you guys on how to do these tuners. Again, you buy cheap stuff, you're going to get cheap tuners. So what makes a tuner not as good as the other one? Well, there's gears in them. And in fact, I have an acoustic guitar here that kind of has open face tuners. So I'm going to grab that real quick and kind of show you that so you can see the inner workings. Now this is a classical guitar. And a classical guitar has nylon strings on it. But they commonly have these open-faced tuners. So what you have is a shaft here that has gears on it. And you have this gear here. And all tuners are basically the same. All right, they could have different configurations, but they're all basically the same. So the difference between cheap and quality guitars is they try to match your turning radiuses to make it easy to turn, but also give you a good turning. Some of them you have to, it seems like, turn 15 times to get it to tune up one note, right? Some of them you barely have to touch and they tune up really good. That's how you could tell whether or not you got good quality. They'll use cheap brass for these gears and they'll strip out, and then you'll start turning, and all of a sudden your string will slip back a note. So you're tuning to a D, trying to get to that E, and then all of a sudden, bam, it slips back, right? To a C or something, and you know you have broken gears in there. Can you fix just a broken gear? Yes, you can. If you have some spare parts laying around, and guys, I don't throw away anything when it comes to guitar parts, right? So don't throw anything away. You'll never know whenever you need it. I try to keep all my spare parts and stuff. If you buy a guitar, especially if you buy a guitar that costs a little bit of money, let's say 400 and up. If you buy a guitar, when you go to resell that guitar, you may have put a fancy trim, new pickups, and new tuners, and you could have really outfitted that guitar a lot. Unfortunately, it in original condition is going to be worth more than all your modifications, and I don't care how much of an upgrade it was. If you take it back down to original, you'll get more money on your trade-in or selling than you will with any modifications. Remember, modifications are done by you, for you, where original is done by the manufacturer because that's what sounds best to the masses, right? So whenever you're going to sell a guitar, take it back to original. Keep the pickups. Unless they were broke, keep them. Unless the pots were broke, keep them. And whenever you go to sell it, try to take it back to as close to original as possible, and you'll get more money. So let's talk about, while I have this here, start talking about nuts, right? This white, it looks almost plastic. At the end of your guitar neck, this is the head of a guitar. Now, again, we have the acoustic classical on the bench, so I'm just going to talk about that for a second. But all guitars are the same. This is the head stock, if you would, of a guitar. Right below your tuning, you'll have a bar that kind of guides that are slotted for each one of the strings, and that keeps that string at the proper spacing and the proper height, so the strings don't go all the way down to the wood. That is called a nut. Now, what makes a good nut and a bad nut? Well, you have plastic, which is not the desired product. Does it work? Yes. Can you make the guitar sound beautiful? Absolutely. Nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't resonate well, and it doesn't last long, and it's cheap material. And again, you get what you pay for. Originally, these nuts were made out of bone. And to be honest with you, I've tried bone and I've tried graphite. Now, graphite is a man-made material that is self-lubricating. It reminds me kind of like Teflon, if you would, right? But it's a solid piece. Graphite works great, and if you're doing a lot of diving with your trim, if you're using that whammy bar a lot, graphite is a great alternative to locking because it slides. That string just slides against that graphite real nice and easy. Just slides back and forth. I prefer bone. Bone to me gives it a little bit more resonance. And what I mean by resonance, the tone lasts a little bit longer. You don't just hit a string and it stops. It hits a string and it just keeps kind of sounding. So it gives it that resonance. It has a unique quality. It adds a little bit of a unique quality to the sound. It sounds more, to me, it just sounds a little bit more alive or vibrant with a bone. Plastic is kind of a dull, dead sound, if you would. Graphite sounds good, but it sounds, to me, it sounds mechanical, if you would, like it almost is coming out of a speaker, or it just doesn't sound natural to me. Although I like graphite, don't get me wrong. I have graphite, I have bone, but I just prefer the bone to me a little bit more. So this is a nut, very, very important. A lot of people don't put enough credit to how important this nut is. You have to have each one of these slots filed to the right width and to the right depth. All right. So how deep it is will keep it off your frets. If it gets too deep, it'll start buzzing against your frets. So you want it the right depth. And there's a gauge for that, and we'll do a video on just how to set your nut up properly. A lot of guys will bring me guitars and say, it's just a little hard to play, and the action's kind of high, and it's hard for me to not, or hard for me to get to the string, blah 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 blah. So I hear a lot of that, and I get it home, and I start measuring everything, and by simply adjusting that nut width and depth makes that guitar a world of difference. And I will and do that, change the strings, adjust the nut, take it back to them, and this is how it's supposed to feel. Oh man, it's so great, it's so great. Not knowing it only took me 2 minutes to sand down measure and sand down their nut a little bit, and that's all it needed. If these slots are not wide enough for that string, it'll hold onto the string and it'll mess up your tuning. So you got to make sure you're using the right size file for this. When we do that video, I'll go over the files that I have. There are a lot of different gauge strings, and you could buy a file for each one of those gauge strings. But I have a little trick that I can show you that you only need about 10 of those files, not 35 of those files to make them good. So I'll show you a little trick on that. I also want to talk about what happens when you cut that slot too deep and it's too close to that string. Is there anything you can do? And I'm going to tell you there absolutely is. You don't need to replace that nut at that point. When you first start sanding and adjusting these nuts yourself, you'll find that you'll be really frustrated how long it takes to sand or to file this large string. But so when you get down to the E, you put the same amount of effort in you did with the big E as the little E, and you inadvertently go too deep, because this one files really, really quick, because it's like a blade almost. It just slices through that bone. So anyway, that is a nut. Next thing we're going to do is look at a locking nut. A locking nut. And these are found in the Floyd Rose system. This nut is actually metal, and it has well, I can take this one off. I don't have them locked. I normally don't keep them locked unless I'm really going to play hard. So your string simply just goes through these metal slots. This is a metal plate that screws onto your neck. When you get it tuned, what you do is you put this plate back on there with this little set screw, and you tighten that all the way down, and that sets that tune, right? That sets it. You can't use these tuners anymore at that point. You have to go down to your Floyd Rose and use those fine tuners at that point. These work really well if you do a lot of diving. If you're taking that trim and you're just wah-wah pedal all day long, doing a lot of effects, this works great, because this guarantees that the string's going to go back in the tune when you're done diving. It works good. A lot of metal players, a lot of shredder type players will use this just because they use the heck out of their wah-wah pedal. So whenever you're changing strings, what I do is before I ever take the old strings off, I check the nut. I adjust that nut. I check the neck. We will adjust the neck, and then I will replace the strings, recheck the nut, recheck the neck, and then I set the action. The action is how far the string is off of your fret, right? So, um, setting the action is very important on how that guitar feels for you. I am going to tell you there's no right or wrong answer on that. It is how you feel, what makes it comfortable for you, um, and what style of music you're playing. So, video we're going to go over changing strings. We're going to change the strings on a Stratocaster, so a floating. We're going to change the string on a Telecaster. We are not going to change the string on a Floyd Rose. Not yet, guys. Okay, we will, but just not yet. Um, we may even do an acoustic guitar. I have an acoustic guitar that needs some new strings, so may change the strings on an acoustic guitar next week. So we're going to talk about body through strings versus rear loaded strings. Um, we'll talk about how to adjust the action, and we'll also get a little bit on the nut, how to adjust that nut a little bit. You'll really surprised on how much that plays when you're setting up a guitar. So we'll talk about that. I'm going to try to keep it basic here for the first few videos. I mean, real basic. I'm trying to teach to like a fifth grade level. But hopefully, within a year, I want to get enough followers and let them tell me what they want to learn. Ask the questions. And again, I take a very practical approach to working on guitars. Again, I don't pretend to know everything that there is to know about guitars. There's probably techs that are 10 times better than me. But everyone that I do the work for, the students, the players, and again, I've worked on $10,000 guitars and I've worked on $100 guitars, but all of them come back and say the same thing. It feels like a new guitar. It feels like it's supposed to. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a little bit of something. If you want a topic, send me the information. I will set the topic up and we'll talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, including off guitar stuff. If you want to talk about music, you want to talk about firefighting, you want to talk about anything, I'm pretty much an open book.